She texted her new address to the wrong number, and a lonely millionaire CEO found her instead. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. It began with a text message sent at 10:47 p.m. on a rainy Thursday night in Seattle. A single mistake, one wrong number, and a story that would change 2 lives forever. Emma Sanders sat cross-legged on the floor of her half-empty apartment, surrounded by boxes that still smelled of cardboard and dust. The rain outside drummed against the window like restless fingers. She had just ended a 3-year relationship, quit her job at a small design firm, and moved into this tiny one-bedroom space that barely had working heat. Her phone screen glowed in the dim light. She typed a quick message to her best friend, Mia. Finally moved in. Here's the new address, Lay. Bring pizza and flowers tomorrow. But exhaustion blurred her eyes, and one digit slipped when she typed the number. She hit send without noticing. Across town, in a high-rise penthouse that overlooked the foggy skyline, Luke Anderson's phone buzzed on his marble counter. He had just poured himself a glass of whiskey when he saw the message pop up. Here's the new address, Lay. He frowned. The heart emoji looked oddly intimate. He almost deleted it, another random text from another stranger, but something made him pause. Maybe it was the warmth in that message, or maybe it was because no one had texted him with affection in months. He typed back, "Got it. See you tomorrow." Meanwhile, Emma smiled at her screen, assuming Mia had confirmed. She tossed the phone aside and looked out the window. A flash of lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating her reflection hair messy, sweatshirt oversized, eyes tired yet defiant. For the first time in a long while, she felt something close to hope. The next day, the weather turned worse. The Seattle air smelled of wet pavement and coffee. Emma was unpacking her dishes when the doorbell rang. She froze. No one was supposed to come until later. Mia was always late, never early. When she opened the door, a man stood there holding a bouquet of white roses, his red jacket gleaming wet from the rain. His dark hair clung to his forehead, his expression unreadable, calm but searching. "Hi," he said. "You texted me your address." For a moment, she just stared, her mind blank. He looked nothing like anyone she knew, too polished, too out of place in this old building. "Sorry, I think you have the wrong apartment," she managed to say. He lifted his phone, showing her screen her exact message, her words, her little red heart. She laughed nervously, but the sound cracked halfway. "Oh my God, I sent that to you?" "Apparently," he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "And since I already bought the flowers, I figured I should deliver them in person." Quote, thunder rolled above them. For a second, she wondered if she should shut the door. Stranger danger, right? But something in his eyes, tired, lonely, maybe a little broken, made her pause. "Do you want to come in?" she asked before she could stop herself. That moment, the world outside seemed to still. Raindrops slid down his sleeve as he stepped inside, the scent of rain and cologne filling the tiny apartment. Sometimes fate does not knock politely, it shows up soaking wet at your door, holding flowers meant for someone else. Have you ever texted the wrong number and wondered what would have happened if that person actually replied? Emma closed the door behind him, the faint scent of rain and roses lingering in the air. For a few seconds, silence filled the small apartment, awkward, uncertain, but strangely calm. She reached for a towel and handed it to him. "Here," she said. "You are soaked." Quote, "Thank you," he replied softly, brushing the raindrops from his hair. His voice was deep, steady, but carried a quiet weight, like someone who had not spoken much lately. Emma motioned toward the couch. "You can sit. I guess I should apologize for the confusion. That message was meant for my best friend." He smiled faintly. "Then I guess I am not the friend you expected." "Not exactly," she laughed, though her cheeks warmed. "But you did bring flowers, so technically you are ahead of her." Quote. The man looked around the room, half-unpacked boxes, sketchbooks stacked on the coffee table, a flickering candle that made the space feel warmer than it was. "You just moved in?" "Yesterday," she nodded, still trying to make this place feel like home. He studied the room again and said quietly, "Sometimes starting over is harder than people think." Something in his tone made her glance at him. "You sound like you would know." He hesitated before replying, I lost someone recently. My mother. Her voice softened. I am sorry. He nodded, not saying more. The hum of the refrigerator and the steady rhythm of the rain filled the silence that followed. Emma leaned back against the counter, uncertain why this stranger felt oddly familiar, as if they had skipped small talk and stepped straight into honesty. Luke looked down at the bouquet he was still holding. I think these were supposed to be for someone else, he said with a quiet chuckle. Keep them, she said. They look too nice to waste. Maybe they will brighten up your place. He hesitated, then placed the flowers in a chipped mug by the window. The white petals looked out of place against the cracked paint, yet somehow perfect there. He checked his watch. I should probably go. I have already interrupted your evening. She followed him to the door. It is fine. You did not interrupt anything worth mentioning. He paused at the doorway, hand on the knob, rain still pouring behind him. Well, for what it is worth, he said. It was nice meeting you, Miss. Emma, she supplied. Emma, he repeated. I am Luke. She smiled. Good night, Luke. When the door closed, the apartment suddenly felt too quiet. Emma turned toward the mug of flowers on the counter, white roses glistening with drops of rain. A small card peeked from between the stems. Curious, she pulled it free. The handwriting was elegant and slanted. New beginnings are never accidents. Quote. Her heart fluttered for reasons she could not explain. Across town, Luke drove through the slick streets, windshield wipers swaying like metronomes. He should have felt foolish for showing up at a stranger's door, but instead, he felt something he had not felt in a long time alive. He replayed her smile in his mind, the gentle way she had said, keep the flowers. It had been months since anyone had spoken to him without an agenda or a title before his name. By the time he reached his building, the city lights reflected in his eyes like distant stars. He placed his phone on the table and looked once more at her message. Finally moved in. Here's the new address saw. He could have deleted it, erased the evidence of that mistake, but he did not. Instead, he left the message there, like a bookmark between two chapters of his life. That night, neither of them could sleep. Emma sat by the window, sketching the man in the red jacket, while Luke stood on his balcony staring at the rain, wondering why a wrong number had felt more genuine than any conversation in years. Sometimes loneliness speaks the loudest through silence. And sometimes it takes a stranger to remind you that even in the wrong story, you can find the right beginning. The next morning, the sky over Seattle was still heavy with rain. Emma woke up to the sound of water tapping against her window and the smell of damp coffee grounds from the night before. Her sketchbook lay open on the counter, showing the unfinished drawing of a man in a red jacket standing in her doorway. She stared at it for a moment, half embarrassed, half intrigued that she had even drawn him. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mia. You never sent me your new address last night. Are you alive? Emma blinked. Wait, Edith. She scrolled through her messages and froze. The number was one digit off. She covered her face, groaning. Oh my God, I really texted a stranger. She typed back quickly. Long story. I will tell you later. Mia sent a bunch of laughing emojis followed by, please do not get kidnapped. Emma smiled despite herself. Her gaze drifted to the white roses on the windowsill. They still looked fresh, their petals catching the gray light. She reached for the small card again. New beginnings are never accidents. She whispered the words like a secret. Later that day, she left the apartment for her interview. It was a small local art studio called Canvas & Co., tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. Emma adjusted her resume in her hands, reminding herself to sound confident, even though her stomach felt like it was tied in knots. Inside, the air smelled like paint and old wood. A woman with bright red glasses greeted her. You must be Emma. Come in, have a seat. Quote. The interview was short but encouraging. They liked her portfolio, her digital sketches, and the fact that she had worked on social campaigns before. When she stepped back outside, the rain had eased into a light drizzle. She stood on the sidewalk, breathing in the city air, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Across town, Luke sat in his office surrounded by glass walls and the low hum of city traffic below. His assistant, Daniel, stood near the desk holding a tablet. You have 3 meetings this afternoon, sir. Do you want me to move the charity board review? Luke shook his head. No, let it stay. His voice was calm, but his thoughts were elsewhere back at that small apartment, at the look in Emma's eyes when she said, You sound like you would know. He should have forgotten her. She was just a stranger, a name attached to a misdirected message. But he could not shake the feeling that he had met her for a reason. He looked down at his phone again, at that single glowing heart emoji that had somehow made its way into his perfectly structured world. By evening, Emma returned home carrying a bag of groceries and a head full of what-ifs. As she unlocked the door, she noticed something resting on the doormat, a small envelope sealed in gold. She hesitated before picking it up. Inside was a folded note written in the same slanted handwriting as before, for when you start over properly. Quote, taped to it was a gift card from a local art supply store. Her heart raced. No name, no address, nothing else, just that message. She looked down the hall, but it was empty except for the faint echo of footsteps fading away. Emma closed the door slowly, her pulse still quick. She wanted to believe it was just a kind gesture, but something about it felt too personal. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the note under the candlelight. The city outside glowed in shades of silver and gold. Her mind replayed his face, his quiet voice, the way he had stood in her doorway like he belonged to another world. She whispered to herself, "Who are you really, Luke?" Sometimes fate plants a seed quietly, long before you realize it is growing. And sometimes that seed arrives as a stranger's kindness on your doorstep. Have you ever met someone by accident and felt like it was not an accident at all? 2 days later, Seattle finally caught a break from the rain. Sunlight slipped through the clouds, touching the streets with a pale warmth that felt almost unreal after a week of gray. Emma decided to use the day to explore the neighborhood. She carried her sketchbook and a to-go cup of coffee, letting herself wander without a plan. For once, she was not rushing anywhere. She ended up at a small cafe by the waterfront called Harbor and Grind. The place smelled of roasted beans and salt from the sea breeze. She took a corner table near the window, opened her sketchbook, and began sketching the people around her, the barista with the messy bun, a couple sharing a croissant, a man in a suit speaking quietly on his phone. Her pencil slowed when she realized the man looked oddly familiar. Dark hair, calm posture, that same quiet presence. Her heart skipped. She blinked, telling herself it could not be, but when he turned slightly, the light caught his face. It was him, Luke. He was not wearing the red jacket this time, just a navy coat and rolled-up sleeves, yet she recognized him instantly. Before she could decide whether to wave or hide, he spotted her. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, everything in the cafe seemed to fade into stillness. Luke hesitated, then walked over. "Emma," he said with a gentle nod, "I did not expect to see you here." She closed her sketchbook quickly. "Neither did I. You are far from your penthouse neighborhood, I assume." He smiled faintly. "I come here sometimes. They have good coffee and peace." She tilted her head, teasing. "For a man who buys flowers for strangers, peace seems relative." He laughed under his breath. "Fair point." A brief silence lingered between them, not awkward but careful. Then he gestured toward the seat opposite her. "May I?" "Sure," she said, though her heart raced faster than she wanted to admit. They sat, and the conversation came easier than it should have between two near strangers. They talked about art, Seattle weather, the smell of rain that never quite leaves the air. She told him about the job interview. He told her about his foundation's new project supporting local artists, though he left out the detail that he was the man funding it. When she mentioned her dream of opening an art cafe, his eyes lit up. "That sounds like something this city needs," he said sincerely. "A place where people can slow down and remember why they create." "Exactly," she replied. "It is not about money. It is about feeling like what you make matters to someone." He nodded slowly. "That is something I forget sometimes." A soft laugh escaped her. "You? Forgetting anything sounds impossible." Quote. He looked out the window for a moment, expression thoughtful. "When you spend years chasing success, you start to lose the reasons you began in the first place." His honesty caught her off guard. There was no arrogance in his voice, only exhaustion like a man tired of wearing the wrong life. After a moment, she said quietly, "Then maybe you just need to start over too." Luke met her eyes. "Maybe I already have." Quote. The warmth between them was subtle but unmistakable, like a match flickering in a cold room. For the first time in months, Emma laughed without forcing it. When he offered to walk her home, she hesitated but agreed. The streets shimmered with the last traces of rain. They walked side by side, talking about small things, her art, his love of old movies, how the smell of coffee at dusk always made the world feel smaller. At her door, she turned to thank him. "It was nice running into you, even if fate had to trick me again." He smiled. "Fate seems to know what it is doing." When he left, she stood in the doorway for a long while, the echo of his words settling softly inside her. Maybe some mistakes are meant to repeat themselves until we learn their meaning. And as she closed the door, she whispered to herself, maybe this is mine. The following week felt different. Seattle was still gray, the air still cool, but for the first time since Emma had moved there, the city did not feel lonely anymore. She found herself checking her phone more often than she cared to admit, half expecting another unexpected message, half hoping for it. Her days became a quiet rhythm of sketching, job hunting, and waiting for something she could not name. Then, one afternoon, it arrived not as a message, but as a phone call. "Emma Sanders?" a woman's voice said. "This is Julia from the Anderson Foundation. We saw your work through Canvas & Co. and would love for you to attend our community art showcase this Friday. It is part of our new program supporting local creators." Emma blinked, surprised. "Wait, the Anderson Foundation? That is—" "Yes," the woman said warmly. "It is a professional but friendly event. Business casual attire if you can. We will send the details by email." After the call ended, Emma stood frozen for a moment. The name Anderson echoed in her mind. Could it be the same Anderson as Luke? She shook the thought away. Seattle was big. The name was common enough. Still, the coincidence made her heart beat faster. On Friday evening, she stood in front of her closet debating between two dresses, both borrowed from Mia. She chose the simple navy one, the color of calm water, and walked to the event downtown. The gallery was bright and modern, glass walls glowing with soft light. Inside, people in elegant clothes mingled over wine and art. She clutched her sketchbook to her chest, suddenly feeling small. She had never been to an event like this. But as she stepped inside, she was greeted by a volunteer who handed her a name tag. "Welcome, Emma. Your portfolio was one of our favorites." "Thank you," she said, smiling shyly. "This is all new to me." "You will be fine," the volunteer said kindly. "Mr. Anderson values authenticity more than anything." Quote, Emma's heart skipped. Mr. Anderson. She turned toward the main exhibit hall just as a low voice echoed through the speakers. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. Art reminds us that even in the hardest seasons, beauty finds its way back to us." The voice was unmistakable. Calm, deep, familiar. Emma's breath caught as Luke Anderson stepped onto the small stage, dressed in a tailored black suit. The crowd applauded, but she barely heard them. All she could see was the man who had stood in her doorway holding white roses, the same man who had pretended to be just another stranger. Her pulse raced. "He lied to me," her mind whispered. Yet part of her heart whispered something else: he did not owe me the truth. After the speech, Luke mingled with the guests, shaking hands, smiling politely. When his eyes met hers across the room, he froze for a fraction of a second. Shock, guilt, and something tender flickered in his gaze. Emma turned away quickly, pretending to study a painting, her emotions tangled between anger and confusion. She wanted to walk up to him and demand an explanation, but her pride held her still. Instead, she left the hall quietly, stepping out into the drizzle that had started again outside. The city lights blurred through the rain. Behind her, the sound of polite applause drifted from the open doors. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders and whispered to herself, "He was never just some guy." At that moment, she realized something deeper than betrayal. She had opened her heart without even noticing. As she walked away, Luke watched her from inside, the bouquet of white roses in his memory flashing before his eyes. He could have let her go and kept his secret safe, but for the first time in years, safety did not feel right anymore. Because sometimes the truth is not what breaks you, it is what finally sets you free. Emma did not remember how she got home that night. The city lights blurred into streaks through the rain-streaked bus window, the sounds of laughter and car horns muffled by the storm inside her chest. When she reached her apartment, she tossed her shoes aside, sat on the floor, and stared at the bouquet of white roses that had long since dried in their chipped mug. He had stood there, on that stage, as if nothing about their first meeting had been real. The man who once shared quiet words over coffee and rain had a last name that owned half the city. Luke Anderson, CEO, philanthropist, millionaire. She whispered the words under her breath, as if saying them might make them less sharp. Luke Anderson. It almost felt like a crueljoke. For the next few days, she tried to bury herself in her art, sketching until her hands cramped, avoiding calls from Mia, and ignoring every notification that lit up her phone. But the more she tried to escape the thought of him, the more his voice echoed in her memory. Sometimes starting over is harder than people think. By Wednesday, she could not take it anymore. She grabbed her coat and stepped out into the drizzle. Seattle smelled like wet pavement again, and every street corner reminded her of that night the night fate had knocked on her door with flowers meant for someone else. She walked aimlessly until she found herself outside the Anderson Foundation building. The glass facade reflected the gray sky, tall and untouchable. She stood there for a long moment, watching people in suits rush past her. She felt invisible, small, foolish, forever thinking a man like him could belong in her world. Inside, Luke sat in his office, staring at a file he could not focus on. Every conversation since that night felt mechanical, hollow. His assistant had noticed. Even his board had noticed. But he brushed off their questions. He could manage his company, his wealth, his reputation, but not his thoughts of her. Finally, he made a decision. He picked up his phone, scrolled to her contact, and hesitated. He had never called her before. The only messages between them were accidents, one text that changed everything. He typed a message instead. "Emma, I owe you an explanation. Please let me see you." He hit send before he could change his mind. Across the city, Emma's phone buzzed in her pocket. She stopped under the awning of a bookstore, reading the message again and again. Her chest tightened. She almost deleted it. Almost. But curiosity, or maybe something softer, made her type back, "You have 5 minutes." Quote, an hour later, they met at a quiet cafe near the harbor, the same one where they had seen each other before. The evening light shimmered off the water, pale and cold. He arrived first, sitting by the window, his red jacket replaced by a dark suit, yet his eyes carried the same loneliness she had seen that night. When she entered, he stood, unsure whether to smile. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I almost did not," she replied. Her tone was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she removed her coat. "I should have told you the truth," he began. "That night when I came to your door, I did not know why I went. Maybe I just wanted to feel like someone ordinary. I did not plan to lie. I just wanted that moment to be real." She looked at him, her eyes soft but guarded. "And what about everything after? The coffee shop, the conversations, were those real too?" "Yes," he said firmly. "Every second of them." Quote, for a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the espresso machine filled the silence. Then she asked quietly, "Do you ever get tired of pretending your life is perfect?" He let out a long breath. Every single day. Something inside her shifted, anger melting into understanding into something she could not name. When they left the cafe, the rain had stopped. They stood by the water, the city lights dancing across the bay. Luke turned to her, his voice low. "I do not want to lose what we found by accident," he said, "even if it began as a mistake." She looked at him for a long moment before whispering, "Then prove it was not one." Sometimes forgiveness does not arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes it starts as a quiet challenge under the streetlights, an invitation to try again. What about you? Would you give someone a second chance if their mistake brought them to your door? The next few weeks passed like a quiet truce. Emma and Luke saw each other again slowly, carefully, never rushing to name what was rebuilding between them. Sometimes they met at the same harbor cafe for coffee. Sometimes she visited the Anderson Foundation to deliver sketches for the new community project he had offered her after the showcase. He never mentioned his title again, and she never asked about the world behind his polished suits and chauffeured cars. Between them, it was simple. Two people talking about books, rain, art, and the strange peace of finding someone who actually listened. One evening, Emma arrived at the foundation to drop off her latest designs. The office was almost empty, the glow of sunset spilling across the lobby's marble floor. Luke was waiting near the elevator, sleeves rolled up, no tie, his jacket folded over one arm. "You are still here," she said, smiling faintly. "I wanted to see the new sketches," he replied, "and maybe walk you home." Her cheeks warmed. "You do not have to do that." "I know," he said, "but I want to." They walked through the streets as the city lights began to shimmer on the wet pavement. The air smelled of rain and roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor. Luke stopped by a park bench overlooking the water. "I used to come here with my mother," he said quietly. "When things got too loud, she said the city always looks softer when it rains." Emma looked at him, her voice gentle. "She must have been kind." "She was," he said, smiling at the memory. "She used to tell me that money builds walls, but kindness builds bridges. I did not understand what she meant until recently." Emma's eyes softened. "I think she would be proud of you." Luke turned toward her. "I am not sure. I spent years chasing everything she told me not to, until you." The honesty in his tone made her heartbeat quicken. She tried to look away, but he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You made me remember what it feels like to be human again," he said quietly. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The sound of the waves against the docks filled the silence. Then Emma stepped back slightly, needing space to breathe. "Luke," she said softly, "you cannot say things like that unless you mean them." "I do," he said. "More than you think." Her eyes flickered with emotion, torn between fear and something fragile that felt dangerously close to love. "You live in a world I will never fit into." He shook his head. "Then I will make mine smaller." The sincerity in his words caught her off guard. She looked down, blinking away sudden tears. "I do not want to be someone you rescue, Luke. I just want to be seen." "You are," he said, "more than anyone I have ever known." Quote, the moment held for what felt like forever until the sharp sound of a camera shutter broke it. A flash came from across the street, someone standing under an umbrella, pointing a phone toward them. Luke tensed instantly. "Journalists," he muttered. "They have been following me since the gala." Emma stepped back, her pulse racing. "Are you serious?" "I am sorry," he said, frustration tightening his jaw. "I should have known better than to walk in public with you like this." Quote, she felt her stomach twist. "So what am I now, another headline?" "No," he said quickly. "You are the only thing in my life that feels real." But she could not hear it. The noise of the city drowned everything else. Without another word, she turned and walked away, the rain beginning to fall again, washing the sparkle from the streetlights. Luke called her name, but she did not turn around. Back in her apartment, Emma stared at the photo already trending online, her face blurred beside him, captioned, "Mysterious woman seen with Seattle's millionaire CEO." Her heart sank. The world she had fought to rebuild now felt like it was slipping away again, swallowed by a story she never chose to be part of. Sometimes love does not end with betrayal, it ends with exposure. Have you ever felt that one moment of honesty could destroy everything you tried to protect? The next morning, Emma woke to the sound of her phone vibrating non-stop. Notifications flooded the screen, missed calls, messages, and social media alerts she did not want to read. Her name was not mentioned directly, but the internet had already built its own story. Anonymous artist, linked to Seattle CEO. Her stomach tightened as she scrolled through the comments. Some were harmless guesses, but others were cruel, calling her a gold digger, an opportunist, a nobody looking for attention. She dropped the phone on the couch, her hands shaking. Outside, the city was bright but cold. The kind of deceptive sunlight that made everything look fine when it was not. She made herself coffee but could barely drink it. Her art supplies sat untouched on the table. Every time she looked at them, her thoughts went back to the flash of that camera, the way Luke's face had changed from soft to guarded in an instant. By noon, she turned off her phone completely. She needed quiet. At the same time, Luke sat in his office on the top floor of the Anderson Tower. His public relations manager was already waiting with a tablet full of headlines. "We can spin it," the manager said quickly. "Say she is part of your charity program, that you were discussing the art event. No one needs to know anything personal." Luke's jaw tightened. "She is not a cover story, she is a person." "Then you need to say something," the manager insisted. "The longer you stay silent, the worse it looks." Luke stood up, walking to the window. The skyline stretched endlessly, but it felt like a cage. He had spent years controlling every narrative, every perception of who he was. Now, for the first time, he did not care about the image. He cared about her. "I will handle it," he said finally. Alone. That evening, Emma heard a soft knock on her door. For a moment, she considered pretending she was not home, but the knock came again, steady, patient. She opened the door. Luke stood there, no bodyguards, no car waiting at the curb, just him. "You should not be here," she said quietly. "I had to be," he replied. "You deserve the truth." Quote. She crossed her arms, keeping distance between them. "The truth? You mean the part where your world chews people up and spits them out for sport? Because I am living it right now." His voice was calm, almost pleading. "Emma, I never wanted this to happen. I know what the media can do. That is why I kept my world separate from yours. But maybe that was my biggest mistake." She shook her head. "You should have told me who you were from the start. You let me believe you were someone normal, someone I could trust." "I am still that man," he said. "The title does not change that." "Maybe not," she said, her voice trembling. "But the noise around you does." Luke stepped closer. "Then let me fix it. Let me show them who you really are. Let me show them that what we have is not a scandal, it is real." Emma hesitated. Part of her wanted to slam the door, but another part, The same part that once saw kindness in his eyes kept her rooted in place. "You cannot fix people's opinions, Luke." "No," he said softly, "but I can tell the truth. About you, about us. If they see my world, they will hear my voice too." The sincerity in his tone cracked something inside her. She looked at him, tired but moved. "And what if it ruins your reputation?" He smiled faintly. "Then maybe it is time they saw who I really am too." Later that night, Luke released an official statement to the press, not drafted by his PR team, but written in his own words. He acknowledged Emma by name. He called her an artist who reminded him what integrity and kindness look like, someone whose work deserved to be seen for its truth, not her connection to him. Emma read it alone in her apartment, tears blurring the words. He had done what he said he would do. He had used his voice not to protect himself, but to protect her. Sometimes redemption is not an apology. It is the courage to stand in front of the world and choose honesty. Would you believe in someone again if they risked everything just to defend your name? The week after Luke's statement felt like a storm that had finally broken. For days, the media buzzed with reactions, debates, and speculation. But slowly, the noise began to fade. People moved on to the next headline, the next rumor, the next distraction. What lingered instead was something quieter: respect. The city had seen a side of Luke Anderson they had never known. A man who stood by someone not because of her status, but because of her truth. Emma watched it all unfold from her small apartment. She had expected chaos to follow his words, maybe even pity. Instead, strangers began sending messages of support. Artists she had never met shared her sketches online, tagging her as the woman who made a billionaire believe in kindness. It was surreal, but also healing. A month later, Emma received an invitation written in Luke's familiar handwriting. It was simple, elegant, sealed in gold. "Please come to the Harbor Gallery on Friday. I want to show you something." When Friday arrived, she almost did not go. Part of her was afraid of being pulled back into his world, afraid of feeling too much again. But curiosity and something deeper won. She wore a cream dress and walked to the waterfront just as the sun began to set behind the skyline. The Harbor Gallery glowed softly, its glass walls lit from within. Inside, people moved quietly, dressed in muted colors, their voices hushed. Emma hesitated at the entrance until she saw him waiting near the center of the room. Luke turned, smiling when he saw her. "You came." "I almost did not," she admitted. "What is all this?" He gestured around the room. Every wall displayed sketches, paintings, and mixed media pieces, all hers. Her breath caught as she recognized her own work. The rain-slicked streets, the man in the red jacket, the window lights spilling across her small apartment. At the center of the exhibit hung one painting larger than the rest, a recreation of that first night. Emma by the door, Luke standing outside in the rain, white roses in his hand. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "The wrong text that found the right heart." Tears filled her eyes. "You did this?" He nodded. "I wanted people to see the story the way it really happened. Not the headlines, not the noise, just the truth." She turned to him, emotion thick in her throat. "You did not have to do this, Luke." "I did," he said softly. "Because that night when I showed up at your door, I thought I was the one rescuing you. But I was wrong. You were the one who saved me." Quote. The room faded away as they stood there, two people who had met by mistake and found meaning where none was supposed to be. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small white rose, fresh and glistening. "I kept one," he said. "From that bouquet, I thought I would save it for the right moment." Emma smiled through her tears. "And this is it?" He nodded. "This is it?" He placed the flower gently in her hand, his voice steady but full of feeling. "You once told me you wanted a place where people could slow down and remember why they create. So, I bought the old cafe on Harbor Street. It is yours now if you want it. Call it whatever you like." For a moment, she could not speak. Her heart swelled with disbelief, gratitude, and something that felt like coming home. Finally, she whispered, "Then I will call it the Right Door." Luke smiled. "Perfect." A few months later, the cafe opened. The walls were lined with local art, the smell of coffee and fresh rain drifting through the open windows. A small framed photo hung near the counter, 2 white roses pressed between glass with a note underneath, "New beginnings are never accidents." Sometimes love does not begin with a promise. It begins with a message sent to the wrong number, answered by the right soul. Do you believe that fate can find its way through the smallest mistakes? If you do, let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes even the wrong door leads you exactly where you belong.